so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's start with this. The Supreme Court ruled 5-0, 5-0, that Becky Hill's comments to jurors triggered what's called the Rimmer presumption of justice, or prejudice, excuse me. In plain terms, what exactly does that mean, and why is that legal standard so significant here?
Well, our South Carolina Supreme Court said that our system of justice demands that every person has a right to a fair trial by an impartial jury, and they emphasize the word every in the opinion. As to Rimmer, the issue is the fact that when you have this outside influence, that there is a presumption of prejudice, that affected the outcome of the trial, that affected the jury's verdict, and that the state, the South Carolina Attorney General's office, had to rebut that presumption. And the state, or ultimately the South Carolina Supreme Court, said that the state failed to do that.
Were you surprised when you heard the news that they unanimously ordered a new trial?
No, in making this decision, I think the uniformity of the court, having every member of the or every justice on the South Carolina Supreme Court be aligned on this decision, sends the message, as far as this opinion is concerned, that they all agree that the United States Supreme Court case law and Rimmer and how it's been subsequently applied by the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals is alive and well. They used that from another case from the Fourth Circuit, quoted as far as the opinion. They wanted to send the message, and they did.
Now, the court called the clerk's conduct, quote, breathtaking and disgraceful. So from a legal standpoint, how damaging are allegations of jury tampering?
Oh, it rocks, as I've said before, the kind of the fundamental system of justice. The cornerstone is that once a jury is impaneled, that they be free from any outside influence, and having not only an outside influence coming from the clerk of court, an official, it just goes to the integrity of the case. There's so many issues that is involved here in terms of how it affects the everyday, well, basically the integrity of the justice system, which is why in that initial paragraph of the opinion, the Supreme Court was so clear that they understand the amount of time, money, and resources that were put into this case. However, for our system of justice to have any integrity, which has been attacked, certainly, through this case and, of course, nationally, that they needed to send the message that every person deserves a right to a fair trial, and that is upheld by this opinion.
And I want to ask this as well. Could this case, because so many people are talking about it, it's received so much attention, could it be a example case of how we handle jury misconduct allegations in the future?
Well, the court actually went through and provided the standard of how, if this issue was to arise again, how they want circuit courts to address this issue, the framework for it. So they addressed that as well. They even, although they didn't rule on any of specifically of the evidentiary issues because of this issue being the reversal of the conviction, they did touch on the what we call the prior bad acts, the 404B financial crimes, and they did provide information related, or at least provided their opinions about how the next trial should go in terms of the guardrails of ensuring that he has a fair trial related to those evidentiary issues as well.
One of the things that I'm seeing on social media is a lot of misinformation about what this decision means. A lot of folks are saying they believe this means that the Supreme Court does not believe that Alex Murdaugh is guilty. However, this is not a situation of guilt or innocence. It's about a fair trial. Can you speak more to that?
100%. This has no bearing on the jury's verdict of guilt or not guilty. And innocence is not actually the standard. The standard is whether the government can prove each and every element of an offense beyond a reasonable doubt. That is their burden of proof in every criminal case. And this goes directly to the heart of the legal issue of whether Alex Murdaugh received a fair trial by an impartial jury, free from outside influences. And as the South Carolina Supreme Court stated, that the clerk of court put her fingers on the scales of justice and, of course, resulted in denying him his right to a fair trial.
I'd like to speak a little bit more about Becky Hill because she is the center of this. There are also some calls for her to have repercussions because this was overturned. Is it possible for her to face charges due to this, or has she already had her day in court?
So she was charged and she did plead guilty. However, the state, the solicitors, and that were involved in that case said that it was not specifically related to the conduct in this case, that it was related to all the other misconduct that she created. I believe that was the government's way of trying to protect this case, try to solidify that the conviction would be overturned, or excuse me, affirmed and not overturned, because the prosecutors had an opportunity to charge her related to misconduct to this opinion, and they did not. They specifically walled it off and limited it in scope. And fortunately, justice prevailed and the system works, that he was denied his right to a fair trial, that the clerk of court, Becky Hill, committed misconduct, and that he will receive a new trial, a fair trial.
And speaking off of your experience and what you have seen, how rare is it for a decision like this to come down?
It's rare. Anytime you have a reversal, it is a very rare thing. Very small amount, a very small percentage of cases get reversed on appeal, particularly a high profile case of this magnitude. Again, with this situation, particularly this misconduct related to a third party or a clerk of court or a bailiff, is even smaller. This is a very rare thing. However, again, it sends the message that our South Carolina Supreme Court wants there to be fair trials in South Carolina, and that the system must be upheld, that the rules in place, not just the rules of evidence, but the United States Constitution and how it's applied in the South Carolina court system, must be followed.
Again, you are listening to criminal defense lawyer Dayne Phillips. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to be looking ahead what this is going to happen next. We want to know what's going to happen next, what this means for the prosecution, what this means for the defense. We'll be talking strategy. Again, that's going to come up on the other side of this short break.